How many have ever gone fishing before? Anybody gone fishing? How many know somebody who fishes? Anybody? Okay, now we're all on the same page, you know? And here's what I know about fishing. Here's what I know about fishing. Fishing is really, really boring until you catch an actual fish. And then it's just disgusting, right? Anybody with me on that? Okay, all right. So some of you might like to go fishing. I've been fishing before. North Dakota is known for amazing, amazing fishing. So you go out to the water's edge, and if I was going to go fishing, I would like to go to a place where there's maybe calm or still waters out there. And I've been to those places in North Dakota. As a kid, you go fishing, and back in the day, you'd have like, here's the terminology, we'd use a hook and a leader and a sinker. Anybody with me on that one? You don't even know what that stuff is. And then a bobber. Do you remember a bobber? You know, this thing that would float on the top of the water, and when that moved on the water, it would give you an indication that there's a fish nibbling at the hook at the end of that line. Now, here's what I also know about fishing. You just, you give it your best bait and tackle. I mean, you put that bait on there, be it the worm, the minnow, the lure, whatever it is you call it at the end there, because you want to entice that fish to come and put that hook in its mouth so that you can pull it out of the water. And so you cast your line out in the water, goes in the water, and now you have no control over what goes on beneath the surface of that water. And you sit there and you wait and you hope that something, but you have no idea. The fish could be sitting at a table having a card party and just looking at your hook going like, Joe's out here again. Yank it a couple times. We love doing that to him, you know. He thinks he's getting a fish. We just jerk on it a couple of times. I mean, you have no idea what the fish are doing beneath the surface of the water, and you have no control over it. You just hope that something's going on. And I think sometimes when people pray, they feel the same way. We speak our mind to God. We might be frantic, we might panic, we might be angry, we might be hurt, we might be lost, we might be alone, we need direction, we don't know what to do. We've heard about prayer, and so we say some kind of a prayer, either with a couple of words or a whole bunch of words, and we just hope that something's going on, but we really don't know. Because when we get to the end of our prayer, it's just quiet. And here's what you know already, and I know. Praying, talking to God is difficult. It can be so hard. We want answers, and we want some certainty of the future. And we are certain of one thing, that there's supposed to be some power bigger than ourselves that we can talk to, that's supposed to change or have an influence or give direction bigger than the situation that we're dealing with. We know that there's got to be somebody there, but we just pray, and it's a little bit like fishing, and we just hear nothing. And I think it would be said of a lot of people in this church here that we can remember the prayers that God didn't answer. And we so often forget the prayers that He did answer. And some praying can be so difficult. And when it's difficult, you know what? Sometimes people look for an alternative to their prayer. We look for an alternative or a shortcut because praying hasn't worked. Going to church didn't work. And so maybe you know people that have looked for an alternative to prayer. This might be an extreme for you, but I mean, in a desperate situations call for desperate means. I mean, we'll go to the Chinese restaurant and look for a fortune cookie. Because maybe the fortune cookie has an answer to the need that I have in my life right now. Or if it's not a fortune cookie, maybe it's a fortune teller. Maybe it's a psychic. Maybe my horoscope will have the answer. Maybe somebody who reads tarot cards. Maybe we'll pull the Ouija board out of the closet. Maybe we'll even go so far as to go to a seance and try to speak to a dead relative, and hopefully they've got the answer for us. People do this kind of things all of the time. Pastor, where are you going with all this? Well, we started this series some time ago, and I asked, what do you want? What do you want to know about from the Bible? And believe it, more than one person said, what does the Bible say about mediums. Not like small, medium, and large. I'm talking mediums. People that claim to have some spiritual connection with another spiritual world. And people want to know, what does the Bible say about that stuff? And actually, the Bible has a lot to say about mediums. So I'm going to share with you some scripture today and some thoughts that I've never shared before. Because I just made an assumption. I made an assumption that nobody in a church would or has dealt with mediums. And I wondered if people asked the question because maybe they have been tempted to, or maybe they have. I'm going to tell you a story about a guy named Saul. He's an Old Testament figure. Saul is the first king of the nation of Israel. Saul is an amazing guy. Saul, we read some things about him. I think Saul was very charismatic. He was a head and shoulder taller than anybody. He kind of starts out his whole kingship with a little bit of humility. And as you read about Saul's life, there was a spiritual curiosity in Saul's life. And there's so much hope resting on this guy Saul to finally be the king and the kind of guy that we want to lead the nation. Now, another key figure at the time that Saul becomes king, his name is Samuel. Samuel is kind of a spiritual barometer or the spiritual compass for the nation of Israel. He's a prophet. If God is going to talk to the nation, he's going to talk to Samuel. Samuel will talk to the king, and we'll kind of get the information out that way. So Samuel is this huge spiritual figure, but at the time that we're going to read about in Saul's life right now, Saul has lost that spiritual barometer because Samuel's dead. He's gone. And when we get to the point we're going to read, Saul is facing the biggest battle, the biggest challenge of his life that he has ever before faced. It is a crisis moment for him, and he needs an answer to the crisis. And you know what it is. You have a crisis that comes to your life. You know people that deal with a crisis. She left you. He cheated on you. You lost your job. Your child's been diagnosed with. And so you do what you're supposed to do. You pray. You pray and you ask God, but there's no answer, and it's just so quiet. And we want to know, we need to know, what am I supposed to do? What's God going to do? How's God going to rescue me and get me out of this? And what should I do and what shouldn't I do? I just need some answers. And so maybe we've had a connection with the church. And so the Bible's supposed to have an answer. Well, where in the world do you look in the Bible? And is the Bible even relevant? Does it even address my crisis right now? And so people sometimes are tempted to look for alternatives to prayer because prayer doesn't seem to work. And this guy Saul, you have to understand, Saul, when he first started his whole king thing, God had a command for him to launch a military campaign. And he gave very specific orders about how to carry it out. And Saul disobeyed God because there was a little rebel in Saul. Kind of like you and me sometimes. And Saul, at this point of crisis in his life, can't see God. He can't hear from God. He doesn't know what to do. And so Saul does something very desperate to get an answer for his crisis. Let me share this story with you. It's kind of fun. It's found in the book of 1 Samuel. This is a historical book. It's a historical book. We're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 28. If you want to follow along, scroll there, turn there. We'll put the scriptures for you on the screen here in just a moment. So whatever you want to do, you just want to listen to the story. It's a great story. It's an amazing story. So let's read it. I'll explain it as we go. Verse number 3 of chapter 28 said this. Saul had banned from the land of Israel all the mediums and those who consult the spirits of the dead. That's the way the story begins. Saul is the king. He's saying, if you're a spiritist or a medium, you can't live here. You're cast out of the country. We want nothing to do with you. In fact, there is a death penalty for anybody who claims to be a spiritist. Now, as we read the story, if you know how the story goes, why would he do this? Well, maybe he's trying to make good with God because he feels guilty for something. There was a command in the Old Testament. God said early on to the Jewish people, he said, don't let any of your people practice fortune telling or use sorcery or interpret omens or engage in witchcraft or cast spells or function as mediums and psychics or call forth the spirits of the dead. That was a command of God early on for the nation of Israel. And why would God do it? Why? God said this is detestable. Don't do this. Don't call upon spiritists and mediums and all these witchcraft. And don't. It's detestable. Why would God call it detestable? Because God knows that the moment a person engages in the underworld, it becomes a portal to that underworld, and you open the portal of darkness into your world, and it can be destructive to you eternally. And so God did, don't even open that door. I want you to live. I want you to be set free. The story goes on. Verse number 4, the Philistines set up their camp. Here's the battle. The enemy, they are the Philistines. Every time the Philistines come out, we hold up a big sign that says, boo. They're the ones who were against the Philistines, set up their camp at Shunem, and Saul gathered all his army of Israel, and they camped at Gilboa. Who knows where Shunem and Gilboa is? I don't know. Maybe it's by Estonia somewhere. All I know, this is where the battle lines were drawn up. And this is what it takes in our life when a crisis comes. We know at the point of crisis, that's the battle line right there. The battle that we wage on the inside of us. Do I trust God or don't I trust God? That's the battle line for us. Verse 5, when Saul, he sees the vast Philistine army, he becomes frantic with fear. You ever been there before? If you haven't, the opportunity to become frantically afraid will present itself to you somewhere. At the loss of finances, the loss of a relationship, the loss of security. It happens to all of us. So verse number 6, he started out with a prayer thing. He asked God what he should do, but the Lord, he refused to answer him either by dreams or sacred lots or even by the prophets. See, Saul was in a state of rebellion at this point in time. His loyalties were divided. And when your loyalties are divided, it's really hard to hear from God. He was also in rebellion. When you are in rebellion to God, it's really hard to hear from God. And so he's doing all the things we normally do to hear from God, but every time we do that, all I hear is the chirp of crickets. And I just can't hear God talk to me. And so verse number 7, it says, Saul then said to his advisors, I want you to find a woman who is a medium. Wait, Saul, you told them, no, just go find her, don't worry about it. Go find this medium so that I can go and ask what to do. And his advisor says, well, there's a medium, some versions of the Bible say witch, at Endor. Have you ever heard of Endor before? You probably have. And now you know where it comes from. I'm telling you, if you don't read your Bibles. This is good stuff. And so he says, I want you to go find a medium, a necromancer, this one that conjures up spirits of the dead for the purpose of magically revealing the future or influencing the course of future events. One who speaks to wraiths and shades. I want to talk to that person. Saul wants to know, what am I supposed to do? I sought God. I didn't hear from God, so I need an alternative. And he's desperate to find out what's going to happen. And so this woman lives in Endor. I think here's the way I picture it in my mind. Saul says, I need to talk to a medium. Is there one close by? And one of his advisors got out his phone and hit the Siri button and says, find a medium near me. And a map came up, and there's one in Endor, because Endor is really close to where the battle was. And Endor, in the language of the Bible, means spirit of the ancestors. A portal into the underworld where we talk to dead people. Verse 8 says, so Saul disguises himself. He's using deception by wearing ordinary clothing instead of his royal robes, and then he went to the woman's home at night, accompanied by 2 of his advisors. Isn't it interesting that Saul at this point is ready to pay money to find this woman who practiced the art of deception, and he himself goes in deception in the dark of night, under the cover of a disguise, under the cover of night, into a dark night, to a dark house, to consult a dark world, to get an answer. Verse number 8, he meets up with the woman. He says, look, I've got to talk to a man who has died. Will you call up his spirit for me? Now, the woman is used to this kind of request. This was her business. This is how she earned a living. I want you to call up somebody from the dead, you diviner, you woman of witchcraft. And here's what I want you to understand. Nobody, then or today, talks to the dead. Maybe they talk to a demon. Maybe they talk to somebody who is in the business of really, really deceiving people well, maybe even deceiving through ventriloquism. Maybe just playing out deceitful, but nobody talks to the dead, not even this woman. She was an ancient time fortune teller, psychic. I mean, that's what she was. But she was connected with the dark world. Saul was desperate enough to talk to somebody from the underworld to help him in this world. Well, the woman, she knew about Saul's order to get rid of all of the mediums from the land, and there was capital punishment for anybody who's caught. So look at her response, verse 9. Verse 9, are you trying to get me killed? Don't you know that Saul has outlawed all the mediums and all who consult the spirits of the dead? Why are you setting this trap for me? I love Saul's response, verse 10. Saul took an oath. He took an oath in the name of the Lord. I promise you by the name of Jehovah God, as surely as the Lord lives, nothing bad is going to happen to you for doing this. Interesting, this is the last time in Saul's recorded life that he's ever going to mention the name of the Lord. And it's when he's consulting a medium. Verse 11. Finally, the woman says, well, whose spirit do you want me to call up? I want you to call up Samuel. Now, the shock of the story comes next. This is amazing. This woman, she's in for a shocker. She did not anticipate this night. Look how this plays out. Verse number 12. When the woman saw Samuel, she screamed, "You've deceived me, you're Saul." She would have never known this except that she saw something that she had never seen before. Oh, she was used to deceiving people. She might have been used to talking to demonic powers, but she had never seen what she saw. I think the real Samuel, God by his supernatural power, resurrects him to that place in that dark house on that dark night to do something amazing in the life of not only that woman, but Saul as well. Never had that happened before. And suddenly Saul's disguise is ripped away. The woman realizes, you're Saul. You've deceived me. You can deceive people, but you can never deceive God. I'm telling you, Saul, the man afraid of the Philistines, the man afraid of the Philistine army. Look how he responds to her in verse 13. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Well, what do you see? What do you see? And she says, well, I see a God coming up out of the earth, she said. Fear and desperation brought Saul to that point. Verse number 14. What does he look like? Saul said, well, he's an old man wrapped in a robe. And Saul realized it was Samuel, and so he fell to the ground before him. What's amazing to me about that is that Saul was a man who was used to living in rebellion, and now suddenly the man who was not willing to submit to the orders and the godly authority of Samuel while he was alive lays down before him while he's dead. It's a desperate situation. Verse 15, Samuel says this, why have you disturbed me? I've been resting. I'm resting in peace. I mean, you read it on my gravestone. Rip, it was right there. You called me up from that. What do you want by calling me back? Samuel asked. Verse 15, he says, look, Saul says, I'm in deep trouble. Saul said, the Philistines are at war with me. God has left me and won't reply to me by prophets and dreams, so I've called you to tell me what to do. What a great story. Samuel, there's a void in my life. I've been crying out to God. I need to know what to do, and God won't answer me, so I'm talking to a dead man. What a desperate place to be. Why would we look to dead things? In fact, Isaiah the prophet even says this. He says, shouldn't people ask God for guidance? Should the living seek guidance from the dead? But you know what? People do. Maybe you have, or you know people that have. Well, Samuel's got an answer for Saul. Saul doesn't know what to do. So in verse 16, Samuel says, you know what? Why are you asking me? Why are you asking me what to do since the Lord has left you and he's become your enemy? Saul, the reason you can't hear him is because your heart isn't even near him. You're living in a state of rebellion. But if you really want to know, I'll tell you what God's going to do. Look at verse 17. The Lord has done just as he said he would do. He's torn the kingdom from you because of your rebellion, and he's given it to your rival, David, who becomes king number 2 over Israel. King David, you've heard of King David. Verse 18, the Lord has done this to you today because you refused to carry out his fierce anger against the Amalekites. That was the battle that he was supposed to carry out at the very beginning. You didn't obey me. You're in rebellion. You want to do your thing. You want to be in control. And as a result, it's hard to hear from God. And again, if you really want to know how everything's going to turn out, Saul, let me tell you, verse 19, what's more is the Lord's going to hand you to the enemy and Israel over to the Philistines tomorrow, and you and your sons, you're going to be here with me. Let me translate that for you. Saul, you're a dead man. Tomorrow, you're dead and your family's dead. And you're going to be in the grave just like I am. Now, I just would pause right there and say, if you're here this morning and you asked the question, what does the Bible say about mediums? Does this answer your question? We're not done yet. I'm just telling you, prayer is hard, but rebellion is harder. Prayer is difficult, but prayerlessness makes it far more difficult. And so, Jesus kind of chimed in on the whole subject of prayer and talking to him because, you know what, it's hard to pray. I know what your schedule's like. I talked to somebody during the meet and greet time. They just got off work at 7 o'clock this morning, and here they are at this church to worship our God. And then we've got life. We've got to take care of family. I've got to take care of my body. I've got chores to do. I've got things to do. I've got a schedule. And some of you are going to get up tomorrow morning. Tomorrow's Monday, and you've got work, and there's a routine, and there's a schedule, and you got a family, and you got to work, and you got stuff to do, and you get home, and you got to take care of the yard, you got to take care of the house, you got to take care of life, all these kinds of things. When am I supposed to pray? And so for a lot of us, prayer kind of gets relegated to the moments of desperation. Oh, God, what am I supposed to do? And we feel so disconnected, so far apart from him because we have not been in a continual place of talking to him day by day. And so Jesus, he chimes in a little bit on the topic of prayer. I love what he says, is because it's like Jesus knows the challenge of praying when he says this in Matthew chapter 6, verse 6. Look at the first 3 words. When you pray. Pause right there. There's an assumption Jesus is making about your life. Jesus assumes that you're going to pray. And he says, now, when you pray, here's what I want you to do. Go away somewhere by yourself. How many know it's really hard to just enter into prayer when you're driving down the highway? Because if you're really getting into prayer, you might shut your eyes, and I don't want you praying. Okay? So just get away by yourself. Shut the door behind you. And then I love this. Pray to your Father in private. And then this is awesome. Look at this. Then your Father who sees everything. You know, when you get in that place where you're alone with God, you're not alone. You're alone with God. And then when you're praying and you're alone with God, look what it says. What's the last thing? He'll reward you. There's a benefit to praying. It's not for nothing. Is it difficult? Yeah, it can be really difficult, but it's not for nothing. There's a reward that comes there. Understand this, that prayer is not trying to get this stubborn, unwilling, cold-hearted, faraway, distant God to do something that you want him to do. Oh God, please, I need you to intervene in this situation. I don't know. I remember what you did on Thursday. I don't know. Let's just watch you suffer a little bit. Not like that. But maybe in the process of prayer, maybe our will bend a little bit to God's will. Jesus prayed. And when Jesus prayed, he really set this amazing example to us of finding a place of just getting intimate with God, getting alone with God, just being quiet and listening to God. You know, sometimes we think praying is about talking. I think prayer is also about listening, but we don't make time to listen. We have to be intentional about listening. I can't wait to get here on the days that I'm in the office, and I can't wait to get my Bible, and I've got a little app on there that plays some music for me. I don't turn on the whole sound system in here, and I sit right back about where you are, 4th row from the back, 5th chair in. Just so you know, if that prayer feels more blessed, that chair is more blessed, I don't know, but that's where I'm at, right back there in the morning. And the reason I'm back there is because the security camera can't see me. I want to be alone with God, and he will reward you. And understand this, when you pray, no crisis in your life is impossible with God unless you measure his ability by your unbelief and your doubt. Either God can or he can't. Either he will or he won't. That when we step into that place of prayer is this food that we put into our spiritual diet that starves the monster of fear and doubt. It's an amazing part of us. Now, let me share with you one last verse, and then we're going to go a couple of different directions as we close the service today. 1 Peter 5:7. I love this. You've heard this before. Give all your worries and cares to God. Pause right there. Just pause right there. Don't read the rest yet. How many of you, I mean, you don't have to show hands, but you know your life right now. How many of you have some worries and cares right now? You have them because this is the life that we live. The world that we live in, the culture that we live in, the daily demands that we are bombarded by creates these situations of cares and concerns and worries in our life. And Peter says, you just throw them at God. Well, why should I do that? Because God cares for you. He cares for you. He doesn't care for you. He cares for you. And he cares for you. And he cares for you. So we're supposed to take our worries to him. Maybe you've heard me illustrate it like this a little bit. At our house, the garbage truck comes by our house on Thursday mornings, about 7:30 on the nose every day. And you know what Robin and I do? On Wednesday night, we get home from doing ministry here at the church, and we load up our garbage can outside the house with all of our garbage. And we roll our garbage can out to the curb. And we just leave it sitting right there next to the street. And from that point on, it's no longer our concern, it's the garbage man's concern. When you pray, you're going to roll your stuff out to the curb. And you're going to put it right there at the curb, and you're going to say, God, this is now your concern.